A struggling mechanic secretly falls for a wealthy woman whose car he fixes regularly, but he hides his true feelings, convinced their worlds could never meet. Just when he's ready to let go, she appears at his garage doorstep in a wedding dress, eyes filled with tears. What she says next changes everything. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? Logan Pierce wiped the grease from his hands, feeling the rough texture of the worn rag as he glanced out the open garage door toward the quiet street beyond. It was late afternoon, and the familiar golden glow of sunset settled gently across the rooftops of Cedar Grove. In the softening daylight, the small town felt suspended in time, like a photograph you stumble across in a dusty attic. The rhythmic tapping of rain began drumming gently on the tin roof above him, adding a comforting soundtrack to his solitude. Logan drew in a deep breath, savoring the scent of motor oil, old leather, and rusted metal, a fragrance he'd known since childhood. His garage wasn't much, a modest brick building, walls decorated with faded posters of classic cars, a small office cluttered with old invoices and forgotten coffee mugs, but to Logan, it felt like home. People in Cedar Grove had come to rely on him. He was the mechanic who fixed their vehicles late at night, who quietly waived fees for families struggling to make ends meet, and who patiently listened as old Mr. Thompson recounted the same war stories again and again while waiting for an oil change. Logan didn't mind. To him, fixing cars wasn't just a job. It was about taking care of people, about being someone dependable, someone who mattered in quiet ways. But beneath his calm, capable exterior, Logan carried scars he'd never let anyone see, dreams he'd buried, disappointments he'd silently accepted. Life hadn't turned out exactly how he'd hoped. He'd once had ambitions bigger than this small-town garage, dreams that had faded with every passing year like old paint peeling away. But Logan had learned to push aside regrets, choosing instead to find peace in simplicity. Yet, lately, the peace he valued had begun to feel hollow, even restless. He felt an unspoken yearning that gnawed at the edges of his contentment, whispering in quiet moments of what might be missing from his careful life. But Logan pushed that feeling down, dismissing it as nonsense, the result of long days and longer nights spent working alone under fluorescent lights. After all, he reminded himself, Cedar Grove was safe, predictable, and comfortable. And that, Logan Pierce told himself once again, was enough. The morning sun had barely broken through the thick layer of gray clouds when the sleek, glossy silhouette of an unfamiliar luxury sedan crawled into Logan's humble garage. The car was striking, expensive, clearly out of place amid the practical pickups and modest family sedans he usually serviced. Logan felt a jolt of curiosity mixed with mild unease, sensing this wasn't the typical Cedar Grove customer who came for routine maintenance. The driver's side door swung open, and out stepped a woman whose presence seemed to instantly shift the atmosphere. She wore an elegant ivory coat draped perfectly over a dress that Logan knew cost more than he earned in a month. Her long, dark hair fell gracefully around her shoulders, framing a face marked by a quiet distress beneath careful composure. Despite her refined appearance, Logan instantly noticed how genuine she seemed, the way her eyes searched the unfamiliar surroundings with an almost apologetic warmth, rather than arrogant dismissal. "I'm sorry to barge in like this," she said softly, approaching Logan as he stood wiping his hands. Her voice was clear, gentle, tinged with embarrassment. "My car started acting up just a mile or so outside town. Yours was the first garage I found." "No worries," Logan said, offering a reassuring smile as he tossed aside the rag he'd been using. He could see her anxiety, the slight crease between her brows, the uncertainty in her eyes. Something about her vulnerability struck him deeply, even more than her evident wealth or her beauty. "I'm Logan. Let's take a look and see what's going on." "Elena Harper," she responded warmly, extending a hand. Logan hesitated briefly, conscious of his grease-stained palm, but Elena didn't seem to care. She smiled genuinely as their fingers touched, holding his gaze a moment longer than expected. Quickly regaining himself, Logan moved toward the sedan, popped the hood, and immediately noticed the faint odor of overheating. As he bent down, his heart thumped irregularly, not from the engine trouble, but from Elena's quiet presence nearby, her delicate perfume mixing oddly but pleasantly with the sharp scent of motor oil. "It's the radiator," he finally said, straightening up and facing her. Elena's shoulders visibly relaxed, and she nodded gratefully. "Easy fix. Give me a couple of hours, and you'll be back on the road." "Thank you," Elena breathed, visibly relieved. Her sincere gratitude warmed Logan unexpectedly, stirring something within him he couldn't fully understand or ignore. Watching her walk toward the waiting area, Logan felt a gentle but unmistakable tug, a quiet whisper that somehow, impossibly, she might just be different. And for the first time in a long while, Logan Pierce allowed himself to wonder if different might be exactly what he needed. In the weeks that followed Elena Harper's unexpected arrival at Logan's garage, something had shifted, something Logan couldn't quite name, something he secretly wished hadn't gripped him so strongly. Elena's visits became regular, almost predictable, yet each time her luxury sedan rolled gently into the worn parking lot, his heart leapt like a restless teenager's. Logan found himself looking forward to these encounters more than he cared to admit, even to himself. Each moment with Elena was quietly intense, filled with subtle conversations about books she loved, films he'd never seen, and life beyond the quiet streets of Cedar Grove. Her elegant perfume, mingled with the garage's gritty air, lingered long after she'd gone, a soft ghost haunting his thoughts. He often watched her from the corner of his eye as he worked, noting how effortlessly she blended elegance with kindness, the way she smiled genuinely at everyone who passed through the shop. Elena seemed immune to the privilege and arrogance that so often accompanied wealth. Instead, she wore her status like a gentle, almost apologetic veil, aware of it, but never flaunting. One rainy afternoon, Elena waited patiently in the small office area, leafing through an old magazine, her eyes occasionally drifting to Logan as he worked quietly on her car. He glanced up, meeting her gaze unexpectedly, and for a brief second, the quiet tension between them flared to life, a spark he felt deeply but quickly suppressed. Logan quickly turned his attention back to the engine, fighting the flush of embarrassment warming his neck. He knew it was foolish, dangerous even, to entertain these feelings. She belonged to a world that didn't include grease-stained hands or late nights beneath the hood of a car, a life filled with glittering galas, wealth, and prestige, not oily coveralls and small-town quietness. Logan reminded himself sternly of their differences, the wide chasm separating his simple life from hers, a divide he knew he'd never cross. Yet, try as he might, Logan couldn't stop his heart from quietly aching when Elena smiled, couldn't prevent his pulse from quickening whenever she laughed gently at one of his shy jokes. He hated himself for wanting her, for dreaming impossible dreams. He had learned long ago that the safest choice was to keep feelings hidden, to bury emotions deep beneath layers of quiet resolve and calm practicality. So Logan forced himself to swallow the words he wished he could say, the gentle admissions that burned on the tip of his tongue, and decided silently, painfully, that Elena Harper would remain forever out of reach, a hidden longing he'd carry quietly and alone. The days grew shorter, casting long shadows over Cedar Grove and Logan's modest garage. As autumn deepened, Logan noticed Elena's visits became more frequent, almost as though she sought refuge from something beyond simple car trouble. Logan never questioned her motives directly, always careful to respect the invisible boundaries between them, yet he couldn't help but sense that something quietly weighed upon her. One chilly afternoon, Elena arrived unexpectedly, her elegant appearance oddly out of sync with her troubled expression. Logan had been sorting through invoices in the small, cluttered office when he glanced up and caught the fragile look in her eyes. "Everything all right?" Logan asked gently, noticing Elena's usual composed smile faltering slightly. She hesitated, pulling her coat tighter around her slender frame. "Honestly, I don't even know anymore," Elena said softly, her voice catching slightly. Her dark eyes briefly searched his face, as if she were silently asking him to understand without needing to explain. "Bad day?" Logan offered quietly, setting down the paperwork, focusing entirely on her. There was a pause, the quiet settling between them like snowfall, gentle yet heavy. She shook her head slightly, a faint, rueful smile appearing. "More like a complicated life," she admitted, eyes drifting toward the rain-dampened street beyond. "I know everyone thinks that having money solves all your problems, but believe me, Logan, it doesn't. Sometimes it just makes things more complicated." Logan watched her closely, heart twisting with the instinct to comfort her, yet aware of the invisible line he couldn't cross. "You know," he finally said carefully, "around here, things might seem simpler, but everyone's got something they're carrying. You're not alone in feeling that." Elena glanced back at him, a small, appreciative smile warming her expression. "It's strange," she murmured. "You seem to see things other people miss. I wish more people were like you." Her words lingered, carrying a vulnerability Logan hadn't expected. A part of him yearned to step closer, to bridge the distance between them, to reassure her she could share whatever troubled her. But another part reminded him sharply of their worlds. The space between elegance and grease-stained simplicity was far wider than he could span. Instead, he nodded softly, allowing the silence to stretch comfortably. Elena didn't speak further, but as she prepared to leave, she paused at the doorway, looking back at him with eyes that quietly hinted at deeper secrets. Logan sensed her wanting to say more, but she hesitated, pulling back into herself, gently shutting the invisible door that separated them. As Elena's luxury sedan disappeared into the fading afternoon, Logan stood silently in the shadows of the garage, curiosity and worry tangling in his chest. Whatever Elena Harper was hiding behind her carefully constructed walls, he wished desperately that someday she'd trust him enough to reveal it. But for now, he knew the quiet ache of unanswered questions was something he'd have to accept, waiting patiently for the truth to find its way out. Outside, the storm came down relentlessly, pounding against the garage roof in rhythmic torrents, turning the usually gentle streets of Cedar Grove into blurred, restless rivers. Logan glanced up through the small window, watching as branches swayed beneath the fierce gusts, leaves scattering wildly like whispers lost in the wind. Inside, the warm glow from a few old lamps cast shadows that danced along the garage walls, providing a comforting contrast to the tempest outside. Elena stood quietly by the window, her elegant coat carefully draped over the back of an old wooden chair. Her arms were crossed loosely, her eyes thoughtful, gazing absently into the chaos of the storm. "I guess you're stuck here for a while," Logan remarked gently, his voice calm and reassuring as he approached her side, hands wiped clean from oil and grease. She glanced over at him, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "I can think of worse places to be stuck," she admitted softly, her eyes holding his for a moment longer than usual before shifting back toward the window. Logan felt his heart stumble at her words, and he instinctively drew in a quiet breath, hoping to calm the sudden warmth rising within him. Turning toward an old coffee machine sitting on a rusted table, he poured 2 cups, handing one to Elena. Her fingers brushed his as she accepted it, sending a jolt of quiet electricity through him. Settling into the mismatched chairs, Elena wrapped her slender fingers around the steaming cup, the warmth seeping into her hands. For a long moment neither spoke, content to let the storm fill the silence. Then Elena softly broke the quiet. "Do you ever wonder," she began gently, eyes fixed thoughtfully on the swirl of coffee in her cup. How life might have been if you'd chosen differently. Logan leaned back slowly, thoughtfully, allowing her question to settle deeply in his chest. "Yeah," he said quietly after a pause. "I think we all do. But sometimes I remind myself that different doesn't always mean better." She nodded softly, eyes lifting to meet his again, vulnerable in a way he'd never seen. "Maybe that's true," she murmured, "but it doesn't stop the wondering." The space between them felt charged, yet fragile, a silent acknowledgement of something neither dared to openly express. Elena's eyes flickered with quiet uncertainty, as if questioning herself. Logan felt his pulse quicken, sensing how close they stood to something unspoken, something irrevocable. Outside, thunder rolled distantly, shaking the windows, pulling them gently from the moment. Elena straightened slightly, her expression shifting, as though she realized how much she'd allowed herself to reveal. "Thank you, Logan," she said softly, voice nearly lost beneath the distant rumbling. "I needed this tonight, more than you know." "Any time," Logan replied gently, sincerity and longing heavy in the simple word. As they sat quietly together, Logan knew something deep had shifted between them. He couldn't ignore the gentle ache in his chest or deny the quiet truth in Elena's lingering gaze. Yet even as the storm outside began to slowly quiet, the tempest in his heart only grew stronger, leaving him wondering whether he could ever truly weather what might come next. Logan had just finished tightening the final bolt beneath the hood of an old pickup when the unfamiliar sound of expensive tires crunching gravel caught his attention. He wiped his hands quickly, stepping toward the open garage doors, just in time to see a gleaming black sports car pulling elegantly into the lot, its flawless paint and polished chrome sharply out of place against the modest surroundings. From the passenger seat, Elena emerged first, her face unusually strained as she forced a polite smile. Her eyes briefly met Logan's, and for a heartbeat he felt a quiet flicker of uncertainty pass between them. Then the driver's door opened, and Logan's heart immediately sank. Richard Hartley stepped out with the casual arrogance of someone used to commanding every room he entered. Dressed impeccably in a tailored suit and polished shoes, he glanced around Logan's humble shop, the faintest smirk of superiority curving his lips. Logan instantly recognized the name and the persona. The Hartleys owned half the businesses across the state, wealthier than Logan had ever imagined himself being. "Richard, this is Logan Pierce," Elena offered gently, stepping toward Logan as if trying to soften the introduction. "He's the mechanic I told you about, the one who's helped me so often." Richard studied Logan with a detached amusement, eyes briefly lingering on Logan's grease-stained overalls. "Ah," he said smoothly, extending a manicured hand, his eyes calculating, assessing. "Yes, Elena mentioned your skills. I suppose everyone has their role, don't they?" Logan accepted Richard's hand firmly, swallowing back the quiet resentment rising in his throat. "I suppose we do," Logan replied steadily, holding the wealthy man's gaze without flinching. An awkward silence settled between them, thickening the air. Elena shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing the tension. She gently placed a hand on Richard's arm, trying subtly to guide him away. "We should get going," she murmured softly, eyes flickering apologetically toward Logan. But Richard wasn't finished. His gaze swept dismissively over Logan's modest surroundings. "Interesting place you have here, Logan," he said coolly. "Charming, really. I always wondered how someone could stay satisfied with so little." Elena's eyes flashed with quiet embarrassment, and Logan felt a sharp, defensive anger coil in his chest. Yet he knew better than to let his emotions show. He kept his expression calm, even as his pulse raced in frustration. "Not everyone measures satisfaction the same way," Logan replied evenly, voice strong despite the ache in his chest. Richard's eyebrows lifted slightly, a patronizing smile flickering across his lips. "Clearly," he replied simply, the single word loaded with quiet contempt. As Richard guided Elena gently back toward the waiting luxury car, Elena paused briefly, glancing back at Logan. Her expression held a quiet sadness, an apology she couldn't voice aloud. Logan nodded slightly, acknowledging her silent message, his chest heavy with the bitter reminder of how distant their worlds truly were. Logan watched helplessly as the expensive car smoothly pulled away, Richard's arrogant laughter fading into the distance, leaving Logan alone in the quiet garage. For the first time, the simple space he called home felt painfully inadequate, empty, a harsh mirror reflecting exactly what he lacked, exactly why Elena Harper could never truly belong here. With a quiet sigh, Logan turned back to his work, trying desperately to shake the lingering feeling that, once again, life had reminded him sharply of everything he could never have. Logan stood quietly at the entrance of the garage, the gentle hum of cicadas in the distant trees blending with the low murmuring of cars passing by. It was early evening, the sunlight softening into muted shades of gold and lavender, painting Cedar Grove in hues of quiet nostalgia. Yet, beneath the peaceful exterior, Logan felt anything but calm. His heart was heavy, filled with restless thoughts that refused to settle. The memory of Richard Hartley's smug face lingered, sharp and mocking, etched into Logan's mind like an unwanted scar. He kept replaying the encounter, the casual cruelty of Richard's words, the subtle yet undeniable air of superiority, the gentle embarrassment in Elena's eyes as she stood by helplessly. Logan's fists tightened involuntarily, knuckles white with suppressed frustration, as he wondered bitterly how a man like Richard could have Elena's heart. More painfully, he wondered why he even cared so deeply, knowing he never had any real right to her. Logan was painfully aware that his life consisted of little more than long hours beneath greasy engines, late nights spent poring over unpaid invoices, and solitary meals eaten beneath the stark glare of a flickering fluorescent light. He'd chosen simplicity, accepted the quiet rhythm of small-town life, until Elena Harper walked through his doors and made him yearn for more. But now, the thought of Elena returning home to the luxury and comfort Richard could effortlessly provide gnawed at Logan's confidence, leaving him feeling small, inadequate, and foolish. He bitterly imagined the glamorous events she attended, the sophisticated conversations she shared, worlds entirely foreign and unreachable to someone like him. Yet, despite the pain, despite the harsh clarity of their differences, Logan couldn't shake Elena from his thoughts. He saw her smile every time he closed his eyes, heard her soft laughter echoing through the empty spaces of his day. Every rational part of him knew he was only torturing himself, but the irrational longing still whispered in his chest, refusing to be silenced. Logan ran a hand roughly through his hair, sighing deeply as he stared blankly into the growing darkness beyond the garage doors. Jealousy, raw and unrelenting, tightened in his chest, mingling dangerously with self-doubt and uncertainty. He despised himself for feeling this way, for allowing a dream so obviously beyond his reach to consume his thoughts. In the quiet solitude of his garage, Logan made a silent promise to himself. He would bury these foolish desires, lock away the quiet ache Elena Harper inspired, and find contentment again in the simplicity he'd always known. Yet even as he made the vow, Logan knew it was hollow. Elena had awakened something inside him that refused to return to sleep, and he feared deeply that it never would. The sky had turned a deep, dusky blue by the time Elena's sleek sedan pulled gently into Logan's garage. Logan looked up, surprise briefly lighting his features. He'd assumed after Richard's arrogant visit she would keep her distance, but here she was again, elegant yet hesitant, stepping out into the fading twilight. "Logan," Elena began softly, a gentle warmth coloring her voice, "I wanted to talk to you about something." He set down the wrench he'd been gripping tightly, wiping his hands thoughtfully, aware suddenly of his grease-stained jeans and faded t-shirt. Compared to Elena's tasteful attire, he felt sharply out of place, painfully reminded of the gap between their lives. "Of course," he replied evenly, carefully masking his discomfort. "What's on your mind?" Elena moved closer, her heels clicking quietly against the concrete floor. Her expression was hopeful, but vulnerable, as though anticipating his refusal even before she'd spoken. "I want you to come with me to a charity gala," Elena said finally, her eyes searching his for a reaction. "It's tomorrow night. It's important to me. You've done so much to help me, Logan. Let me repay the favor." He hesitated immediately, heart tightening painfully as images of Richard's smug face filled his mind, reminding him exactly how out of place he would be in that glittering world. "I appreciate it, Elena," Logan said carefully, avoiding her pleading gaze. "But I'm not sure it's a good idea. Those events aren't exactly my scene." She stepped closer, gently placing a hand on his arm. Logan's pulse quickened at the unexpected touch. "Please," she whispered softly, sincerity clear in her eyes. "I need someone there who understands me, someone I can trust, not just another face in the crowd, and that's you, Logan." Her words echoed softly, mingling with the rapid beating of his heart. Elena's expression held a quiet desperation that tugged relentlessly at his resolve, eroding his defenses. His instincts urged him to keep distance, reminding him sharply of the humiliation he'd felt when Richard belittled him, of how painfully inadequate he would surely feel again. But another voice, quieter, gentler, whispered that Elena's request was genuine, a plea born of trust and respect. He recognized her vulnerability, saw clearly the loneliness she fought so hard to hide beneath her composed exterior. Logan sighed softly, reluctantly giving in to the pull of Elena's eyes, the quiet hope they contained. "All right," he finally conceded, his voice quiet, almost resigned. "I'll come." Relief and genuine joy flickered warmly across Elena's face, lighting her expression in a way that left Logan momentarily breathless. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly with gratitude. "You have no idea how much this means." As she walked away, Logan stood silently in the fading daylight, already feeling the weight of anxiety and uncertainty settle upon his shoulders. He knew that attending the gala meant stepping directly into the world he'd always avoided, one of glittering facades and ruthless judgment. But as Elena's car disappeared from sight, he reminded himself softly that this was for her, not him. Logan hoped desperately, silently, that he'd find the strength to face whatever awaited, if only to see her smile like that again. The grand ballroom glittered beneath an extravagant chandelier, each crystal casting shimmering reflections across the polished marble floor. The air hummed with gentle laughter and polite conversation, the scent of expensive perfume and champagne drifting around the room like a luxurious cloud. Logan hesitated at the entrance, adjusting the sleeves of the unfamiliar suit that felt heavy and foreign against his skin. From the moment he'd arrived, Logan had felt painfully aware of how drastically out of place he was. Every glance from the elegantly dressed guests felt sharp. Each whispered word behind delicately gloved hands seemed to silently question his presence. His palms grew clammy, and his heart pounded as self-doubt crept heavily into his chest. But then he saw her, Elena, standing quietly near the expansive windows, soft moonlight caressing her gentle features. She wore a dress of deep sapphire silk, her dark hair cascading gracefully over her shoulder. She looked effortlessly beautiful, yet Logan noticed something fragile in her gaze, a quiet loneliness that matched his own discomfort. As if sensing his arrival, Elena turned and immediately smiled, her eyes brightening. Crossing the room swiftly, she reached out, gently taking his hand, pulling him softly away from the curious eyes of strangers. "I'm so glad you're here," she whispered sincerely, her voice warm and genuine. Logan felt some of his anxiety begin to melt beneath her quiet reassurance. I still think this might have been a mistake, he admitted softly, glancing around nervously. I don't really fit into your world, Elena. She squeezed his hand gently, holding his gaze with a calm intensity that left his pulse racing. That's exactly why I invited you, she murmured, because you're real. In this place, that's rare. Her quiet confession stirred something deep within Logan, soothing the ache of inadequacy he'd carried since arriving. Elena led him gently onto the empty terrace, away from the extravagant crowd, where the cool night air settled comfortably between them. You must think my life is perfect, Elena said suddenly, her voice low and thoughtful. She gazed quietly at the distant stars, a soft sadness clouding her eyes. But in places like this, people hide behind masks, Logan. I've worn mine for so long, sometimes I forget who I really am. Logan watched her silently, feeling the honesty in her words like a quiet tremor. Then who are you, Elena? He asked softly. She turned slowly, her gaze lifting to meet his. I'm someone who feels trapped, she whispered, vulnerability etched in every syllable. Someone who desperately wants something real, something simple, someone like you. Her words hung gently in the air, their meaning clear and powerful. Logan's heart pounded fiercely, a chaotic rhythm echoing loudly in his ears. For a long moment, they stood quietly, the distance between them reduced to something fragile, something dangerously thin. Yet just as quickly, Elena looked away, embarrassed by her honesty. I shouldn't have said all that, she murmured, voice faintly shaking. No, Logan interrupted gently, softly touching her arm, feeling the warmth radiating through the fabric of her dress. I'm glad you did. As silence settled once more, Logan felt profoundly grateful he'd stepped out of his comfort zone to attend this event. Despite the luxurious world that surrounded them, despite feeling utterly out of place, he knew in that quiet, shared moment beneath the stars that this was exactly where he belonged, standing beside Elena, where worlds collided and everything else quietly fell away. The distant hum of the gala faded behind them as Elena gently led Logan deeper into the quiet garden, the sounds of music and laughter, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves in the nighttime breeze. Moonlight sifted through branches overhead, casting pale, silvery patterns onto their path. Elena's steps slowed, then stopped completely, her fingers nervously playing with the delicate bracelet encircling her wrist. Logan watched her carefully, sensing her hesitation. Is everything all right, Elena? He asked softly, voice barely above a whisper, careful not to break the fragile silence surrounding them. Elena turned slowly to face him, the vulnerability in her eyes visible even in the shadows. Do you ever feel trapped, Logan? She asked quietly, her voice tight, with barely controlled emotion. As if your life belongs to someone else and you're just following a script written for you? Logan felt a pang deep in his chest, watching her quiet struggle. I suppose we all do sometimes, he replied gently, stepping a little closer. Is that how you feel? Elena nodded slowly, eyes glistening faintly, as she turned her face upward, letting the cool breeze brush away the threat of tears. It's my family, she whispered, her words almost carried away by the wind. My whole life, they've expected perfection, who I should be, how I should behave, who I should marry. Her voice caught painfully on the last word. Richard isn't a choice I made freely, Logan. He's a choice everyone else made for me, a choice I've felt forced into accepting. Logan's heart twisted painfully at her confession, a sharp ache of empathy mingling with the ache of his own quiet longing. He stepped nearer, wanting desperately to comfort her, yet deeply aware of the invisible boundaries between them. You deserve to make your own choices, Elena, Logan told her softly, sincerity thick in his voice. To follow your own heart. No one has the right to take that from you. She lifted her gaze to his, eyes wide and searching, her face reflecting quiet gratitude and something deeper he couldn't quite name. "It's not that simple," she murmured, sadness coloring her words. "There's so much tied up in this. Family expectations, business interests, reputation. Sometimes it feels impossible to choose myself." Logan gently reached out, carefully placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. He felt her trembling softly beneath his fingertips, felt the delicate vulnerability in her tense posture. It took all the strength he had not to pull her close, to let her feel the depth of his care, to show her she wasn't alone. "You are stronger than you realize, Elena," he told her quietly, his voice carrying the reassurance he knew she desperately needed. "You deserve happiness, real happiness, not something dictated by others." Elena looked up at him, her eyes filling with unshed tears as she nodded slightly, allowing herself to briefly lean into his gentle touch. Logan's chest tightened painfully as he held her gaze, silently fighting the overpowering urge to voice the truths he kept hidden, the feelings he desperately needed to keep buried. Instead, Logan forced himself to step back, creating gentle space between them. "No matter what," he whispered softly, "just know you're not alone." In the moonlit stillness, they stood quietly together, hearts aching silently beneath the weight of unspoken truths. Logan knew the quiet pain he felt now would linger long after this moment had passed, but he also knew he would willingly carry it, if only to offer Elena the comfort she needed tonight. Late afternoon sunlight spilled lazily through the garage windows, painting warm streaks across the concrete floor as Logan quietly organized his tools. Lost in thought, he nearly missed the sound of polished shoes crunching lightly on gravel, a subtle intrusion that immediately sharpened his senses. Turning swiftly, Logan's heart sank when he saw Richard Hartley standing in the open doorway, his impeccably tailored suit a stark contrast to the rugged simplicity of the shop. Richard stood silently for a moment, eyeing Logan with a calculating stare that conveyed both contempt and subtle amusement. "Logan Pierce," Richard began, his voice deceptively smooth, like silk masking a blade. "Interesting place you have here. Quaint." Logan's jaw tightened slightly, but he forced himself to remain calm, his voice even. "What can I help you with, Mr. Hartley?" Richard took several leisurely steps forward, his gaze sweeping across the modest surroundings, lingering pointedly on Logan's worn boots and oil-stained hands. "You see, Logan," he continued, "I've become aware of your friendship with Elena. She's told me about how helpful you've been. Admirable, really, but—" He paused, his eyes sharpening, the veneer of charm falling away entirely. "I'm starting to wonder if there's something more going on here, something inappropriate." Logan's pulse quickened, anger simmering beneath his careful exterior, yet he chose his words with deliberate calm. "Elena and I are friends," he replied evenly, though he felt the quiet sting of guilt for the feelings he'd hidden. "Nothing more." Richard's smile returned, colder now, chilling Logan's skin. "I'm glad to hear that," he said quietly, voice tinged with menace. "Elena's future, and mine, is carefully planned. It's not a future you fit into, I'm sure you understand." The threat in Richard's words was subtle, yet unmistakable, his eyes cold, void of sympathy. Logan felt the bitter taste of humiliation in the back of his throat, mixed with a deep resentment he struggled to control. "I'm not trying to interfere with Elena's life," Logan replied tightly, holding Richard's stare firmly, refusing to show weakness. "She makes her own decisions." Richard stepped closer, voice dropping to an icy whisper. "Not all decisions are hers to make. Elena has obligations. Obligations to her family, to me, a world you couldn't possibly comprehend. It would be unfortunate if you complicated things for her." A tense silence settled between them, broken only by the distant hum of cars passing by outside. Logan felt a sharp ache in his chest, recognizing the dangerous truth in Richard's words. He could never offer Elena the security, the comfort, the wealth Richard effortlessly provided. But the cold arrogance radiating from the man before him stirred a fierce determination within Logan's heart, a quiet defiance he hadn't fully realized he possessed. Richard stepped back finally, straightening his jacket with casual disdain. "Keep your distance, Logan," he said quietly, voice dangerously calm. "It'll be better for everyone." Without waiting for a response, Richard turned sharply, disappearing into the fading daylight, leaving Logan standing alone in the shadowy garage, fists clenched, heart heavy with a volatile mixture of anger, humiliation, and quiet resolve. As Logan slowly unclenched his fists, he realized bitterly that Richard was right. He didn't belong in Elena's world. Yet, despite the painful truth, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Elena deserved far better than Richard Hartley, and Logan's heart burned quietly with the determination to protect her, even if it meant breaking his own heart to do so. Elena sat quietly by the large window in her elegant bedroom, the fading light of evening gently washing over her thoughtful face. Outside, the gardens stretched endlessly beneath a hazy sky, their beauty somehow lost on her tonight. She held a small photograph in her delicate fingers, staring at the smiling faces, her family gathered neatly, perfectly posed, and impeccably dressed. It felt distant, unreal, an illusion of happiness she'd always been expected to maintain. She drew in a trembling breath, feeling the weight of expectations pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. Elena knew exactly what her family anticipated: the perfect wedding, the perfect marriage, the perfect life. But perfection, she thought bitterly, was an exhausting charade, a relentless performance she'd been forced into since childhood. Her eyes drifted to the gleaming diamond ring on her finger, Richard's extravagant declaration of their engagement, a symbol of wealth and social status. The stone sparkled coldly beneath the dying sunlight, a reminder of her commitment, a commitment she felt increasingly trapped by. Richard represented everything her parents wanted: success, stability, a suitable match for the family's prestigious reputation. Yet, beneath his charming smile and polished manners, Elena saw something troubling, an emptiness, a coldness she couldn't fully ignore. Her thoughts drifted inevitably to Logan, the quiet mechanic whose kindness and warmth had quietly unsettled everything. Elena remembered the sincerity in Logan's gaze, the gentle strength in his voice, the quiet authenticity she found nowhere else. When she was with Logan, the pressure faded. With him, she could breathe, could imagine a life defined by simplicity and genuine connection rather than wealth or expectation. Yet the voice of her family's demands, their judgmental whispers, echoed clearly in her mind, warning her of scandal, failure, disgrace. The world she inhabited was cruel and unforgiving. Stepping away from it felt terrifyingly impossible. Tears welled softly in her eyes, blurring the photograph she still held tightly. Her heart twisted painfully in her chest, a quiet storm raging fiercely within her. Elena desperately wanted freedom, to be true to herself, but the fear of disappointing everyone she loved was paralyzing. Suddenly overwhelmed, she stood, pacing restlessly, the elegant room feeling unbearably confining. Her reflection caught in the ornate mirror on the wall, and she stared at herself, hardly recognizing the woman looking back, trapped, uncertain, painfully unhappy. In that quiet, painful moment, Elena made a silent, desperate wish: to find the courage to choose happiness, no matter how difficult, how painful, or how costly. But deep down, beneath layers of fear and doubt, she wondered if she would ever truly be brave enough to break free, to choose a life defined not by others' expectations, but by the desires of her own quietly aching heart. The fading daylight bathed Logan's garage in warm shades of amber and rose, casting long shadows across the worn concrete floor. Logan was busy organizing his tools, lost in thought, when he heard the quiet sound of footsteps. Glancing up sharply, he felt his heart skip at the unexpected sight of Elena, standing hesitantly in the doorway, her eyes filled with something fragile and uncertain. "Elena?" Logan murmured, surprise and concern evident in his voice as he quickly stepped toward her. "Is everything all right?" She smiled faintly, though her eyes betrayed deeper emotions beneath the surface. "I'm sorry to just show up like this," she whispered softly, glancing nervously around the dimly lit garage. "I just needed someplace real tonight, someplace safe." "Of course," Logan said gently, his voice soothing as he gestured her inside. "Come in." Elena stepped deeper into the comforting familiarity of the garage, quietly breathing in the scent of motor oil and worn leather. She seemed almost relieved by the simplicity around her. Logan watched carefully, sensing the weight of unspoken pain she carried. They settled near the workbench, the silence around them gentle yet heavy. Elena sighed softly, her gaze drifting to Logan's hands, stained with the marks of hard work, honest labor. "I envy this, you know," she murmured suddenly, eyes lifting to meet his, vulnerability clear. "Your life. It's simple, honest. Nobody expects you to pretend. You're just you." Logan swallowed hard, fighting the ache in his chest at her quiet words. "You deserve that too, Elena," he whispered. "You deserve honesty, freedom, happiness, not this facade everyone expects you to wear." Her eyes filled softly with tears, her fingers nervously toying with the delicate bracelet at her wrist. "How?" she breathed, voice shaking slightly. "How do I break free without disappointing everyone I care about?" Logan stepped closer instinctively, drawn by her quiet distress, the warmth of her presence tugging fiercely at his heart. "Sometimes," he began, his voice gentle yet strong, "you have to disappoint others in order to stay true to yourself." Elena gazed up at him, her eyes wide and searching, vulnerability shimmering quietly between them. Logan felt his pulse quicken, his chest tightening with the unspoken truth he'd desperately hidden for so long. "Elena," he murmured quietly, her name trembling slightly in the silence, dangerously close to confessing the truth he fought to suppress. Her gaze locked with his, questioning, hopeful, scared, an invitation he feared to accept. Logan's heart thundered, his breathing uneven, the ache of desire painfully sharp. But Richard's warning, the reality of their vastly different worlds, echoed sharply through his mind. Logan knew he couldn't burden Elena further, not when her life was already so complicated. Slowly, painfully, he stepped back, breaking the fragile intensity between them. Elena seemed to sense his hesitation, a flash of quiet sadness passing through her eyes, as she nodded softly, understanding his silent withdrawal. "You're right," Elena finally whispered, attempting a brave smile through unshed tears. "I just wish—" Her voice trailed gently, the quiet ache unspoken yet understood. Logan nodded slowly, heart heavy, knowing exactly what she wished, because it was what he wished too. As Elena quietly departed into the growing darkness, Logan watched her leave, feeling as if he'd lost something precious. Yet beneath the bitter ache of regret, he found quiet strength, determined to protect Elena from further pain, even if it meant bearing the heavy weight of his unspoken love alone. The morning sky was gray and heavy, mirroring Logan's weary mood as he arrived at the garage. He went through his daily motions, unlocking doors, switching on lights, and brewing a pot of strong coffee, all with a mechanical numbness. He couldn't shake the memory of Elena's eyes the night before, filled with unspoken longing, vulnerability he longed to soothe, but knew he had no right to address. Lost in thought, he barely noticed the small chime above the garage entrance, signaling someone's arrival. Looking up, he saw Mrs. Patterson, one of his regular customers, a sweet elderly woman who seemed unusually hesitant today, her kind face troubled. "Morning, Logan," she said softly, concern flickering in her eyes. "Morning," Logan replied, forcing a gentle smile as he moved closer, sensing something unspoken hovering between them. "Everything all right?" Mrs. Patterson shifted uncomfortably, glancing down at the newspaper folded tightly in her trembling hands. "Oh, Logan dear," she murmured gently, voice soft with quiet sympathy. "I thought you'd probably want to see this. With quiet reluctance, she handed him the paper. Logan's heart froze at the bold headline emblazoned across the society page, next to an elegant photograph of Elena smiling warmly, her hand resting delicately in Richard Hartley's confident grasp. Logan's vision blurred momentarily, the letters swimming painfully before settling into brutal clarity. Harper Hartley wedding set for October 15th, the year's most anticipated event. Logan felt as if the air had been forcibly knocked from his lungs, the news hitting him with a quiet but devastating force. His chest tightened painfully, a bitter ache spreading slowly through him, rendering him briefly speechless. "Oh, Logan," Mrs. Patterson whispered, her voice gentle and comforting, but he could barely hear her through the roaring in his ears. "I'm so sorry. I know you two were close." He nodded slightly, unable to trust his voice, his throat thick with emotion he desperately fought to control. Mrs. Patterson gently squeezed his arm before quietly slipping away, leaving him alone with his heavy thoughts. Logan stumbled backward until he leaned against the workbench, gripping it tightly for support as the stark reality sank in. October 15th, just weeks away. His mind filled with images he wished he could erase. Elena standing beautifully at the altar beside Richard, pledging a life she didn't truly want, bound forever to a man who neither knew nor understood the real Elena Harper. The thought tore at Logan's heart, sharp and relentless, mingling anger and sorrow. He felt foolish and naive, chastising himself bitterly for allowing dreams to creep into his heart, for daring to hope that Elena might choose differently. Yet beneath his pain, he felt something deeper, a quiet, simmering regret that he hadn't spoken the words burning silently inside him. Perhaps if he'd found the courage to tell Elena the truth, things might have been different. Maybe she could have seen a future beyond Richard, beyond expectations, beyond the glittering emptiness of wealth. Now Logan knew it was too late. The date had been set, the path chosen, and Elena was lost to him, just as he'd feared all along. He crumpled the paper tightly in his fist, shoulders slumping in quiet defeat, painfully aware that this moment marked the end of a fragile dream he never truly had a right to hold. Logan felt the bitter chill of autumn seep deeper into his bones as the days slipped by, each one blurring indistinctly into the next. In an effort to bury the ache deep within his chest, he threw himself relentlessly into his work, filling every waking hour with oil-stained hands, late-night repairs, and the comforting hum of engines. Sleep became elusive, but Logan didn't mind. The exhaustion helped numb the persistent sting of Elena's impending wedding. Each day, as he stood beneath the fluorescent lights, his mind inevitably drifted back to Elena. Memories crept stubbornly into his thoughts, the warmth of her laughter filling the garage, the sincerity in her eyes when she confessed her deepest fears, the delicate way she smiled when she thought no one was looking. He missed her desperately, but he knew that clinging to hope would only prolong the pain. So instead, he chose to let go, to silently accept the truth that Elena's life was moving forward without him. When Elena stopped by the garage one afternoon, her expression full of cautious hope, Logan forced himself to remain distant, polite, yet painfully reserved. He felt the tension thickening between them, saw the quiet confusion flicker through her eyes, but he pushed it away, afraid that one small moment of vulnerability would undo everything he was struggling to maintain. "Logan," she murmured softly, her voice filled with uncertainty, "are you all right?" He felt the ache flare again at the tenderness in her tone, but he forced his voice to remain steady, emotionless. "I'm fine, Elena," he replied quietly, avoiding her gaze. "Just busy." The silence that followed was filled with hurt, confusion, and unspoken questions, but Logan didn't trust himself enough to speak. Elena lingered for another painful moment before turning away, the quiet click of her heels echoing in his heart as she left. Logan's chest tightened, and for the first time, the silence in his garage felt unbearably heavy. He closed his eyes, silently berating himself for causing her pain, but he knew it was necessary. He had to protect himself from the inevitable heartbreak that would come with watching Elena marry Richard, stepping forever beyond his reach. Days turned into weeks, and Logan became a quiet shadow within Cedar Grove, withdrawing even further from friends, declining invitations, losing himself in solitude. People noticed, their concerned glances and gentle whispers following him, but Logan only retreated deeper into the comforting familiarity of his work. Yet no matter how hard he pushed himself, the pain lingered, stubbornly clinging to his heart like rust on metal, impossible to scrape away completely. He had hoped that immersing himself in work would dull the ache, but instead it sharpened the quiet realization of what he had lost, what he had willingly surrendered. Late one evening, standing alone beneath the flickering garage lights, Logan finally acknowledged the painful truth. Letting go didn't erase Elena from his heart. Instead, it only buried her deeper, making him acutely aware of how empty his world felt without her. He knew moving forward would never be easy, but Logan vowed silently to continue trying, no matter how painful each step would be. The morning broke gray and solemn over Cedar Grove, casting a somber shadow across Logan's quiet garage. The world outside was still, as though holding its breath for Elena's wedding, the event everyone had been anticipating with eager whispers and bright excitement. But within the shelter of his workshop, Logan moved in silence, methodically arranging his tools, carefully avoiding any thoughts of the event that haunted him. He hadn't slept the night before. Instead, he'd paced the worn floors of the garage, drinking coffee in the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, trying desperately to drown out the painful images that kept invading his thoughts. Elena dressed in white, radiant and unreachable. Richard Hartley's confident, triumphant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Logan's chest tightened at the thought, a bitter wave of sadness mingling with quiet anger that burned at the edges of his heart. The gentle chime above the garage entrance sounded softly, and Logan glanced up sharply, his heart involuntarily leaping with irrational hope. But it was only Tom Mason, an old friend and customer, looking concerned and uncertain in the doorway. "Thought I'd find you here," Tom said quietly, stepping hesitantly forward, clearly aware of the painful day Logan faced. "You sure you're okay?" Logan forced a tight smile, shrugging carefully. "Just another day, Tom," he replied, the lie bitter on his tongue. "Work doesn't stop because of a wedding." Tom nodded slowly, unconvinced, but respecting Logan's boundaries. "If you change your mind, there's room at the tavern tonight. You know you're always welcome." Logan offered a grateful nod but said nothing further, silently acknowledging the kindness he wasn't ready to accept. When Tom quietly departed, Logan felt a pang of regret at pushing people away. But isolation seemed safer than facing pity-filled stares or sympathetic whispers. As hours passed, Logan buried himself in work, attempting to drown his heartache beneath the familiar routines of engines and wrenches. Yet every small sound from outside seemed magnified, the distant hum of passing cars, gentle laughter carrying softly on the wind, the faint echoes of church bells ringing triumphantly through the town. Each sound was another bitter reminder of the happiness that belonged to Elena, a happiness that would never include him. Evening approached slowly, darkness filling the corners of the garage, casting long shadows across the floor. Logan's movements grew slower, more burdened, exhaustion finally catching up to him. He sank heavily onto the wooden stool near the workbench, his head bowed in quiet resignation. For the first time, alone in the quiet of his sanctuary, Logan allowed himself to feel the full weight of his grief. Tears stung the corners of his eyes, but he refused to let them fall, his fists clenched tightly, fighting against the overwhelming sense of loss. Today, Elena Harper had married another man, stepping irrevocably out of Logan's reach. He had prepared himself for this moment, yet the reality of it still cut sharply, deeper than he had imagined. Logan sat motionless, feeling each painful heartbeat as the garage filled with shadows, finally admitting silently that no amount of work or solitude could erase the love he carried. But tonight, alone in his grief, Logan accepted that he would quietly bear the ache, hiding it deep beneath a hardened exterior, determined never to reveal just how deeply Elena's wedding day had truly wounded him. Logan stood at the back of his garage, shoulders hunched over an engine he wasn't even truly working on, his mind drifting somewhere far away from the task at hand. The evening was quiet, the silence only broken by the occasional passing car on the deserted street. Darkness had long settled over Cedar Grove, wrapping the town in a comforting blanket of anonymity, something Logan desperately sought tonight. The sudden, frantic sound of hurried footsteps outside startled him from his trance. Logan straightened, turning sharply as the garage door swung open, revealing a sight that stole his breath completely. Elena stood trembling in the doorway, her bridal gown cascading around her in layers of delicate white silk, the hem now stained and dirtied from running. Her dark hair had fallen loosely around her shoulders, and tears glistened brightly in her eyes, illuminated softly by the garage's dim lights. Logan's pulse surged painfully, his mind reeling at the impossible sight before him. "Elena?" he whispered hoarsely, hardly daring to believe she was truly there. What happened? She took a shaky step closer, eyes wide and desperate. "I couldn't do it, Logan," she choked out, voice cracking beneath the weight of her emotions. "I tried. I really tried, but I couldn't marry Richard. I couldn't pretend anymore. It felt wrong, all of it." Logan moved instinctively toward her, concern overriding the confusion that gripped him. "Elena, are you all right? Did something happen?" She shook her head quickly, tears spilling silently down her cheeks, leaving glittering trails in their wake. "Nothing specific, just everything," she whispered desperately. Standing there in front of everyone, hearing the vows, I realized I was making the worst mistake of my life. I realized my heart wasn't in that church. It was here, with you. Logan's chest tightened painfully at her words, shock and longing mixing into a fierce storm within him. But beneath his immediate relief at seeing her, he felt the quiet ache of reality, the weight of the turmoil she must be experiencing. Carefully, gently, he reached out and guided her further inside, away from the doorway, and into the safety of the garage, shutting the world out behind them. Elena trembled beneath his touch, her breathing ragged, fragile. "I know this is selfish," she murmured softly, her eyes searching his desperately. "I know I have no right to ask for your help or your forgiveness. But Logan, I didn't know where else to go." Logan gently cupped her face, brushing away the tears with a tender touch, fighting his own racing pulse and the quiet disbelief still gripping him. "You don't need to ask for forgiveness, Elena," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm here. Whatever happens, I'm here." She leaned into him then, finally allowing herself to break down fully, sobs shaking her slender frame as she clung to Logan for comfort. He held her tightly, his heart pounding wildly, emotions swirling fiercely in his chest. As she slowly calmed, Logan knew this moment changed everything, that Elena's presence, her choice to run to him, was a quiet yet powerful declaration. Yet even as he held her, quietly reassuring, Logan knew this night would bring new challenges, deep wounds that would need careful healing. For now, however, in the quiet warmth of the garage, he allowed himself to hold on to hope, determined to face whatever came next alongside Elena, no matter how difficult, no matter how painful. The garage fell into a deep, tender silence as Elena slowly stepped back, her hands trembling slightly, eyes filled with a fragile hope and quiet vulnerability. Logan stood frozen, hardly daring to breathe, every heartbeat roaring loudly in his ears, waiting anxiously for her next words. Elena's gaze lowered to her hands, clasped tightly in front of her as she gathered courage. When she finally lifted her eyes to Logan's again, they shimmered softly in the dim light, her voice barely a whisper. "I couldn't marry Richard, Logan. When I stood there, surrounded by all those people, everyone watching, waiting for me to say, 'I do,' I felt something break inside me. I realized I was about to promise my life to someone I didn't truly love, someone who didn't truly understand me." Logan felt his chest tighten painfully, every carefully suppressed hope, every hidden desire flaring back to life with a fierce intensity. "Elena," he murmured softly, taking a cautious step toward her, heart pounding fiercely, afraid that even speaking too loudly might shatter this fragile moment. Her eyes met his again, and a gentle strength seemed to fill her. "From the moment I met you," she whispered earnestly, her voice trembling slightly, "everything felt different. When I'm here, when I'm with you, I feel free. I feel real. I've tried to deny it, tried to push it away, because I was terrified of disappointing everyone else. But the truth is, my heart has always been yours." Logan felt the quiet sincerity in her words like a physical force, overwhelming and powerful. He took another step closer, the space between them narrowing until he could see the soft rise and fall of her chest, the delicate flush on her cheeks. "I've hidden how I feel," he finally admitted quietly, his voice hoarse with emotion, "because I never believed someone like you could ever truly want someone like me." Elena shook her head gently, tears glistening in her eyes as a faint smile appeared on her lips. "You've always been more than enough, Logan. From the beginning, you showed me what genuine kindness looks like, what real love feels like. You've always been exactly what I needed." Logan reached out, gently brushing a tear from Elena's cheek, feeling her tremble softly beneath his touch. "I never stopped hoping, Elena," he whispered, voice heavy with quiet longing. "Even when I thought I'd lost you, I never stopped." She stepped into his embrace then, her body fitting perfectly against his, her warmth seeping into the aching spaces of his heart. Logan wrapped his arms tightly around her, savoring the delicate scent of her perfume, mingling softly with the familiar garage air. For a moment they stood together silently, holding tightly to each other, hearts finally unburdened, free from secrets and lies. Logan knew the path ahead would not be easy, that challenges would surely follow Elena's bold decision, but for now, standing quietly with the woman he loved, he allowed himself to believe that this moment, this fragile confession beneath the garage lights, was exactly where they were meant to be. Logan gently pulled back from Elena's embrace, his heart still pounding fiercely in his chest. The quiet intimacy of their shared confession filled the garage, but deep within him, beneath the warmth and hope, a shadow of doubt lingered stubbornly. Elena noticed the quiet tension returning to his eyes and reached out softly, her fingers grazing his cheek. "Logan?" she whispered gently, her voice holding a quiet fear of its own. "What's wrong?" Logan sighed deeply, feeling the heaviness of his unspoken doubts settle once more on his shoulders. He stepped away slowly, turning to gaze thoughtfully out into the darkened street beyond the garage doors. Elena moved closer, sensing the shift, her presence warm and patient beside him. "Elena, everything you said, everything we both said, I want it to be real," Logan began quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "But there's a part of me that can't shake the truth about how different we are. You come from a world I barely understand, a world of luxury, of security, of privilege. What if the life I can offer isn't enough?" Elena shook her head softly, her eyes searching his face earnestly. "Logan, you're already enough. It doesn't matter where we come from." He turned to face her again, pain clear in his eyes. "I want to believe that," he admitted quietly. "But the reality is, Elena, I've seen the kind of life you've lived, the places you go, the opportunities you've had. Richard and your family, they can give you everything, stability, comfort, the kind of life you deserve. But me? I'm just a mechanic with grease-stained hands in a small-town garage. What happens when the excitement wears off and you realize that I've held you back?" Elena's expression softened with compassion as she gently took Logan's hand, holding it tightly, determined not to let him slip away again. "Logan, the stability and wealth you're talking about never brought me happiness," she said gently but firmly, sincerity burning quietly in her eyes. "I felt suffocated by it. With you, for the first time, I feel alive. Isn't that enough?" Logan's jaw tightened as he struggled against the fear rising in his chest. He wanted desperately to trust her words, to believe that love alone could bridge the divide between their worlds. But experience had taught him to be cautious, wary of dreams too big to grasp. "What if love isn't enough?" Logan murmured, voice thick with quiet uncertainty. "What if someday you look around and regret leaving everything behind? I don't want to be the reason you give up the life you were born into." Elena cupped his face gently, forcing his eyes to meet hers. "Logan, listen to me. I would give up everything 1,000 times if it meant choosing a life that's real, a life where I'm loved for who I am, not what I represent. I'm not afraid of letting go of my past, but I am afraid of losing you." Her words resonated deeply within him, breaking through the walls of doubt and fear. Logan sighed softly, feeling the gentle warmth of Elena's unwavering belief seeping through his defenses. Slowly, he felt himself begin to let go of the fears he carried, knowing deep down that Elena had already chosen the life she truly wanted. In that quiet moment, Logan realized that perhaps together, their love might just be strong enough to overcome every fear, every difference, every obstacle. Even if the path forward was uncertain, he was finally ready to face it. Elena took Logan's hands firmly in her own, stepping closer until there was barely any space left between them. Her eyes shone brightly, determination replacing every shadow of doubt, her voice strong despite the soft tremble of emotion beneath it. "Logan, all my life people have told me what I need to be happy," she began earnestly, holding his gaze with quiet intensity. "They've surrounded me with luxury, convinced me that wealth, status, and privilege were everything. But I've never felt more empty or alone than when I stood in that lavish ballroom, surrounded by people who barely knew me, let alone loved me." Logan watched her carefully, sensing the depth of truth in her words. Still, the quiet ache of fear lingered in his chest, a stubborn doubt he struggled to overcome. "Elena, I just want to be certain that you're not giving up too much," he whispered quietly. "I couldn't bear seeing regret in your eyes." Elena shook her head softly, her expression gentle, yet fiercely determined. "The only regret I have is that I didn't choose you, sooner," she murmured passionately. "Love isn't found in the things people can buy, Logan. It's not something measured in wealth or privilege. Real happiness comes from connection, from being seen and understood, exactly the way you've always seen me." He exhaled slowly, feeling her sincerity piercing through the walls he'd built around his heart. Elena stepped closer still, her gentle warmth filling every corner of his world. "Do you remember the night we spent here, in the storm?" Elena whispered softly, her eyes filled with tender memory. "It wasn't luxury or status that made me feel safe. It was your presence, your kindness. When you spoke, when you listened, when you made me feel valued and loved, that's what happiness truly feels like, Logan." Logan felt his chest tighten, every quiet doubt finally fading beneath her powerful, honest words. He gently cupped Elena's face, feeling the warmth of her skin, the gentle pulse beneath his fingertips. "I've always wanted to give you the world," he murmured quietly, voice filled with quiet vulnerability. Elena smiled softly, eyes bright with emotion. "You already have, Logan. Your world is the only one I want, the one I've chosen freely, the one where I can be my true self." Logan felt a quiet surge of hope, a warmth that spread through his chest and finally silenced his fears completely. He leaned forward slowly, gently resting his forehead against Elena's, closing his eyes for a moment as he breathed in the quiet reassurance of their shared connection. In that tender silence, Logan finally allowed himself to believe fully in Elena's words. He knew there would still be obstacles to overcome, difficult conversations and judgments from those who couldn't understand their choice. But none of it mattered now. Together, they had chosen a love stronger than expectations, deeper than status, and more powerful than wealth. As Elena gently wrapped her arms around him, holding him tightly beneath the soft glow of the garage lights, Logan knew with absolute certainty that happiness was right here, in her embrace. And this choice, rooted deeply in love and genuine connection, was one he would never regret. The morning sunlight washed softly over Cedar Grove, painting the small town in shades of gentle gold. Yet, as Logan walked down Main Street holding Elena's hand, he felt the weight of dozens of eyes settling on them, curiosity and surprise mingling openly with quiet judgment. Beside him, Elena held her head high, her expression calm, but he could sense her pulse quickening through the warmth of her fingers, gripping tightly to his. In the days following Elena's dramatic departure from her wedding, whispers had quickly spread through the community, murmured conversations behind closed doors, cautious glances, and speculative stares. Logan knew that their decision had shaken the sleepy town, challenging expectations and disrupting familiar routines. But as they stepped together into the morning sun, Logan felt an unexpected strength in Elena's presence, drawing courage from the quiet resolve in her eyes. At the corner coffee shop, heads turned sharply, conversations dimmed into whispers. Elena hesitated only briefly before gently squeezing Logan's hand, guiding him confidently toward the counter. Margaret, the cafe owner, watched them approach with wary curiosity, her gaze quietly studying Elena. "Good morning, Margaret," Logan said softly, meeting the older woman's questioning stare directly. "2 coffees, please." Margaret nodded slowly, her expression softening slightly as she caught the gentle sincerity in Logan's voice. "Of course," she murmured carefully, before glancing toward Elena. "Elena, dear, it's good to see you back in town." Elena's posture relaxed visibly, relief flickering softly across her features. "It's good to be back," she replied gently, her voice clear and steady, despite the cautious tension that lingered in the air. As they sat at a table by the window, Logan could still feel the weight of curious eyes upon them. A quiet hum of whispers, barely audible beneath the comforting sounds of clinking cups and quiet music. Elena's eyes softened as she studied Logan, noticing his tension. "Are you all right?" she asked gently, reaching across the table to gently squeeze his hand again. Logan sighed softly, offering her a small smile. "It's not easy having our lives become everyone else's conversation," he admitted quietly. Elena nodded in understanding, her gaze steady and reassuring. "They'll adjust, Logan. Eventually they'll see what we already know, that this is real. They'll have no choice but to accept it." Her quiet confidence was comforting, but Logan couldn't help noticing how her eyes briefly flickered toward the passing townspeople outside, their quick glances unmistakably pointed. Still, she held firm, clearly determined not to hide or retreat. A soft, familiar voice suddenly broke through their shared silence. Tom Mason approached their table cautiously, pausing briefly as he took in the sight of them together. "Logan, Elena," he said carefully, his expression thoughtful but warm. "Just wanted to say, well, not everyone in town is whispering about this. Some of us think it's good to see 2 people brave enough to follow their hearts." Logan felt a quiet surge of gratitude, his chest tightening gently. Elena's eyes brightened with appreciation. "Thank you, Tom," she murmured sincerely. As Tom moved away, Logan finally felt some of the weight lift from his shoulders. Though the path ahead wouldn't be easy, and though judgment lingered in the cautious gazes of their neighbors, they had taken the first step, openly choosing each other. In the soft morning glow, Logan knew this fresh start was worth any price they might pay. Elena's gentle, hopeful smile reinforced the quiet truth that together they were strong enough to face whatever judgment lay ahead, brave enough to live authentically in a world still adjusting to the love they had chosen. In the days that followed their public appearance together, Logan felt the weight of the town's whispers grow heavier, like a slow-building storm cloud hanging over Cedar Grove. Every time he stepped into the grocery store or passed by familiar faces on the street, the whispers would quieten, eyes glancing away quickly, guilty yet curious, their judgment echoing louder than words. Elena, too, felt the pressure. Although she moved gracefully through the town, her head held high, Logan could see how each whispered comment chipped away quietly at her confidence. He knew this wasn't easy for her, knew the strength it took for her to stand by him in the face of such scrutiny, and he admired her deeply for it. One afternoon, as they walked through the town square hand in hand, Logan sensed the tension radiating from Elena, her fingers gripping his tightly. He glanced down at her gently, noticing how her shoulders had stiffened, eyes lowered briefly as they passed Mrs. Daniels and her friends, women who had openly adored Elena when she was Richard's fiancée, yet now regarded her with cool distance and barely hidden judgment. Elena slowed suddenly, breathing deeply, gathering her strength. She turned toward the women, her voice clear yet gentle. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Daniels. How have you been?" Mrs. Daniels hesitated, momentarily taken aback by Elena's quiet courage. "Oh, fine, Elena," she murmured stiffly, clearly uncomfortable beneath Elena's gentle gaze. "We were just talking." "I can see that," Elena replied softly, a quiet strength in her voice. "I understand this might be confusing or even disappointing for some people, but I made the choice that felt right to me. All I ask is for the chance to live without judgment." Logan stood silently beside Elena, pride swelling quietly in his chest at her bravery. Mrs. Daniels offered only a terse nod before turning away, her companions following with whispered words Logan chose not to hear. Elena sighed softly, her fingers tightening gently around Logan's once more. "I know it's hard," she whispered as they continued walking, "but I refuse to hide or pretend." Logan squeezed her hand gently, offering quiet reassurance. "I'm proud of you, Elena. Standing up for yourself, for us, is incredibly brave." She smiled softly, the tension slowly easing from her expression. "As long as we face it together, Logan, I can handle whatever they say." In the days that followed, they faced each judgment, each pointed stare, together, their quiet commitment unwavering. They found strength in simple moments shared in Logan's garage, quiet evenings spent beneath gentle lamplight, laughing softly, ignoring the world beyond their own quiet sanctuary. And slowly, quietly, some in the town began to soften. The whispers became less harsh, the gazes less critical, gradually replaced by reluctant acceptance. Logan felt the shift, subtle yet profound, realizing that their quiet strength, Elena's graceful bravery, his steady presence, had begun to reshape Cedar Grove's perception. Together, they had weathered the storm of judgment, emerging stronger and more deeply connected than ever before. And though Logan knew the road ahead might still hold challenges, he was certain now, more than ever, that with Elena by his side, no amount of judgment or gossip could break the bond they had built. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window of Elena's family estate, casting long, elegant shadows across the richly furnished living room. But inside, the atmosphere felt tense, charged with quiet hostility. Elena sat stiffly on the velvet sofa, facing her parents across the ornate coffee table, their disapproval etched sharply in every carefully controlled expression. Her mother's eyes were steely, voice clipped with an icy politeness that Elena had learned to dread. "Elena, darling, surely you understand how inappropriate this entire situation is. We raised you better than this. Think about your future." Elena met her mother's gaze steadily, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and quiet determination. "My future, Mother, is finally something I'm deciding for myself. Logan and I—" Her father interrupted sharply, leaning forward with quiet intensity, his voice commanding. "Logan Pierce is hardly suitable for you, Elena. He's a mechanic from Cedar Grove. This infatuation you have is nothing more than a distraction. Your marriage to Richard was supposed to secure your future, not jeopardize it." Elena's breath hitched softly, frustration tightening her chest. "You chose Richard for me, Father. I never loved him. Logan has shown me what real love is, something neither wealth nor status can buy." Her mother sighed deeply, shaking her head with quiet disdain. "Love is not everything, Elena. Love doesn't guarantee security, respect, or acceptance. You're throwing away everything your family has built for you. For what? A small-town romance destined to fail?" Elena felt her throat tighten painfully, but she refused to falter. "I understand you don't approve, but Logan makes me happier than I've ever been. Isn't that worth something?" Her father rose abruptly, pacing slowly across the plush carpet, his eyes sharp and calculating. "You're being naive, Elena. Think about the embarrassment, the damage to our family's reputation. People are talking. Your choices affect more than just yourself. They affect all of us." Elena stood too, her voice quietly firm despite the tears stinging her eyes. "For years I've lived my life worrying about appearances, hiding who I really am just to please everyone else. For once I'm choosing happiness, real happiness. I refuse to sacrifice myself any longer." Her mother's expression softened slightly, eyes filling briefly with quiet desperation. "Elena, please reconsider. Think carefully about what you're giving up." Elena shook her head softly, sorrow mingling gently with her quiet resolve. "I already have. I'm sorry if you can't support this, but I won't change my mind." The silence stretched painfully between them, thick with unspoken hurt and quiet anger. Elena turned slowly toward the door, heart aching deeply at the quiet sob she heard behind her. Still, she walked away, knowing the painful truth that her parents might never accept Logan or understand her choice. Outside, beneath the setting sun, Elena paused, drawing a deep, steadying breath. She knew the path she'd chosen would not be easy. She knew she'd just challenged the family she'd always tried so desperately to please. But despite the ache in her chest, Elena felt a quiet strength growing within her, a strength born of finally standing up for herself, of choosing her own happiness, no matter how difficult the cost. Logan stood quietly outside the elegant gates of the Harper estate, his heart thudding anxiously in his chest. Twilight painted the grand mansion in soft shades of lavender and gold, yet Logan couldn't help but feel utterly out of place amidst such wealth and refinement. Still, he drew a steadying breath and stepped forward, determined not to waver. Elena had faced her family's disapproval alone long enough. He was resolved to stand beside her now, no matter the cost. Inside, he felt the heavy silence instantly, tension radiating from every polished surface, every glittering chandelier. Elena stood in the grand foyer, her posture tight with anxiety, until her eyes met Logan's, and a gentle relief spread softly across her features. He smiled quietly, reassurance flowing silently between them. Her parents appeared moments later, their gazes sharp with skepticism, but Logan held steady beneath their quiet scrutiny. Elena's father cleared his throat gruffly, his voice deep with quiet authority. "Mr. Pierce, this is unexpected." "I know," Logan replied respectfully, stepping closer, his voice calm but sincere. "I came here tonight because Elena deserves someone who won't hide from difficult situations. I may not be the man you envisioned for your daughter, but I love her deeply, and I promise I'll always protect and support her." Her mother's eyes softened subtly, yet skepticism lingered. "Logan, love alone doesn't solve everything. Elena has certain expectations and responsibilities. Our concern is whether you can truly understand that." Logan nodded gently, his gaze earnest and unflinching. "I understand your concern. I can't offer Elena wealth or the prestige she's used to, but I can offer loyalty, honesty, and genuine love. I know my world seems small compared to yours, but everything I have, I'm willing to share with Elena. Her happiness is all that matters to me." Elena stepped forward, gently taking Logan's hand, her presence strengthening him. Her father watched them carefully, a quiet shift subtly softening his rigid expression. "You speak confidently," he finally acknowledged, voice carefully neutral. "But words are easy. Actions matter more." Logan met his gaze steadily, nodding with quiet sincerity. "You're right. And if given the chance, I promise my actions will speak louder than anything I can say tonight." A heavy silence followed, stretching uncomfortably. Then Elena's mother stepped slowly forward, her gaze thoughtful as she studied Logan carefully. "You know, Logan, it would have been far easier for you to stay away from us entirely. Yet you're here, standing your ground, fighting for Elena openly. That's not something just anyone would do." Elena's father hesitated, then finally gave a reluctant, respectful nod. "Perhaps we've misjudged you, Logan. It seems your character may run deeper than we first thought." Relief quietly filled Logan's chest, mingled with deep gratitude. He squeezed Elena's hand gently, feeling her silent pride and relief. Though acceptance from her parents was cautious and uncertain, Logan recognized the first small step toward understanding and mutual respect. As they quietly left the estate hand in hand beneath the soft glow of emerging stars, Logan knew earning Elena's family's trust would take time, but tonight he had proven himself, standing strong in the face of doubt. And for now, that small victory was enough to give him hope. The sun dipped gently beneath the horizon, bathing Logan's garage in soft amber twilight. Logan had spent all day carefully arranging every detail, his heart racing anxiously, palms damp with nervous anticipation. He'd envisioned this moment countless times, hoping desperately it would feel perfect, that Elena would see beyond the simplicity of the setting and understand the deep symbolism behind his choice. The garage, usually filled with the sounds of tools and the smell of motor oil, had been transformed into something quietly magical. Soft strings of lights hung delicately along the walls, casting a warm golden glow over the familiar space. Candles flickered gently atop the workbench, illuminating a small bouquet of wildflowers Logan had gathered himself, simple yet carefully chosen. He heard Elena's footsteps approaching, her gentle laughter drifting softly through the open doorway, filling his chest with a tender warmth. When she stepped inside, her eyes widened in quiet surprise, the gentle glow illuminating her beautiful features. She turned toward Logan, her expression filled with wonder and curiosity. "Logan," she breathed softly, her eyes shimmering with emotion, "what is all this?" He stepped forward carefully, heart pounding fiercely in his chest, struggling to steady his voice. "Elena, this garage is where everything began. Our worlds collided here, in a place you once came to by accident, but which somehow became our sanctuary. I chose it tonight because it symbolizes who we are together, two different worlds joined by something real." Elena's breath caught softly as Logan gently took her hands, guiding her closer. "From the first moment you walked through that door, I knew my life would never be the same," he whispered earnestly, his eyes never leaving hers. "You showed me a kind of happiness I never imagined I could feel. You gave me hope and courage, Elena, and I can't imagine living without you." Slowly, Logan knelt down on one knee, carefully pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Elena's eyes filled with tears, her fingers trembling softly in his grasp. "Elena Harper," he said softly, voice thick with quiet emotion, "you've taught me that true happiness isn't found in wealth or status, but in real connection, genuine love, and shared dreams. Will you marry me? Will you share this simple, imperfect life and build something extraordinary together?" For a brief, heart-stopping moment, Elena stood motionless, the silence heavy with anticipation. Then, softly, a radiant smile broke across her face, tears spilling gently onto her cheeks. "Yes, Logan," she whispered, her voice trembling with pure joy. "1,000 times, yes." Logan felt relief and exhilaration rush through him as he gently slid the ring onto her finger, the symbol of their unity catching softly in the candlelight. Rising slowly, he embraced Elena tightly, feeling her warmth, hearing her gentle laughter, mingling softly with quiet tears. In that quiet moment, beneath the familiar roof of his humble garage, Logan knew they had forever bridged the gap between their separate worlds. No longer defined by differences, but instead by the strength of their shared love, their commitment was now sealed, genuine, and unbreakable. Proof that true happiness is found not in wealth or luxury, but in the quiet, powerful union of two hearts determined to choose each other. Sunlight streamed softly through the large windows of Logan's garage, now transformed into a makeshift workshop for wedding preparations. Elena stood by an old wooden table, carefully arranging delicate floral centerpieces, her eyes sparkling with quiet joy. Beside her, Logan watched with gentle amusement, occasionally adjusting a ribbon or flower with a cautious hand. Their friends and family moved quietly around them, each contributing something special, blending the simplicity of Logan's small-town roots with Elena's natural elegance. Logan's friends had helped build sturdy wooden benches for seating, their rough edges softened by tasteful fabrics chosen carefully by Elena. Elegant ivory candles flickered gently atop simple glass holders, casting a warm, inviting glow that symbolized perfectly their union, a harmony between sophistication and sincerity. "Are you sure this isn't too rustic for you?" Logan asked quietly, stepping closer and gently resting a hand at Elena's waist. He watched her carefully, still anxious that their worlds might not blend as easily as they hoped. Elena smiled gently, eyes bright with reassurance, as she touched his face softly. "It's exactly what I dreamed of, Logan. I spent my whole life surrounded by lavish weddings that felt cold and impersonal. This is real. It's meaningful. It's us." Logan relaxed softly beneath her touch, feeling the quiet truth of her words deep in his chest. Nearby, Elena's mother carefully placed elegant silverware atop simple wooden tables, her cautious skepticism finally giving way to quiet acceptance. Logan watched as Elena gently guided her mother, their quiet laughter breaking down remaining walls of tension, creating bonds where doubt once lingered. Later, standing together beneath the soft glow of evening lights, Logan and Elena quietly surveyed their preparations. Elena's elegant taste had perfectly complemented Logan's quiet simplicity, creating a setting that felt beautifully balanced, authentic yet refined. Logan drew her closer gently, his voice filled with quiet admiration. "I never imagined we could blend our worlds so effortlessly." Elena smiled softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. "That's because love is effortless, Logan. It's people who complicate it." Her words resonated deeply within him, reminding Logan once again of the quiet strength and wisdom she brought to his life. Despite the judgment they'd faced and the doubts they'd overcome, standing together beneath these carefully hung lights, Logan knew without question that they had built something uniquely their own. In that gentle moment, as friends and family gathered around them, Logan finally understood the true meaning of partnership, not just blending two separate lives, but celebrating each other's differences. Their wedding would be a reflection of both their worlds, a quiet tribute to their journey, a symbol of everything they had overcome. As Elena reached out, gently adjusting a small flower on his shirt, Logan felt his heart swell with quiet gratitude. Tomorrow would mark a new beginning, the next chapter of their lives. And for the first time, Logan felt truly ready, fully prepared to embrace the beautiful complexity of loving Elena Harper, knowing that together they had already accomplished something remarkable, the merging of two hearts, two worlds, into one extraordinary love. The morning sun rose gently over Cedar Grove, casting soft rays of gold, and rose across the small garden behind Logan's garage. Birds sang softly from nearby branches, their melodies a gentle accompaniment to the heartfelt laughter and excited whispers filling the air. Today, beneath an endless sky, Logan and Elena would finally become husband and wife. Not in a grand cathedral surrounded by cold marble and distant acquaintances, but here, in the warm, familiar space that symbolized their journey. Logan stood quietly beneath a simple wooden arch woven with wildflowers, heart pounding as he watched Elena step slowly down the grassy aisle. She was radiant, dressed in a gown that perfectly captured her spirit, elegant yet understated, beauty wrapped in quiet simplicity. Her eyes met Logan's, shimmering softly with emotion and gentle tears, their connection unbreakable in that tender moment. Family and friends surrounded them, each face warm with support and quiet pride. Logan felt deeply moved by the genuine acceptance in their eyes, knowing the path they'd taken to reach this day hadn't been easy. Yet standing here, beneath the gentle sunlight, he felt the weight of every struggle fade quietly away, leaving only joy and gratitude. As Elena reached him, Logan took her hands gently in his, feeling the slight tremble of her fingers. He squeezed softly, reassuringly, their gazes locked tightly together. The officiant began quietly, his words gentle yet powerful, speaking of unity, love, and courage. When the time came for vows, Logan's voice trembled slightly, thick with quiet emotion. "Elena, you walked into my life and showed me what it means to truly love, to fight, to choose, to cherish someone wholeheartedly. From this day forward, I promise to always stand beside you, to honor your dreams, to support your hopes, and to never take for granted the incredible gift of your love." Elena's eyes filled softly, her voice gentle yet strong. "Logan, you've taught me that happiness isn't found in wealth or appearances, but in sincerity, compassion, and true connection. I promise to love you fiercely, to be your strength when you feel weak, and your joy when days are hard. Together, we can face anything." Their vows echoed softly beneath the open sky, filling every heart present with deep, tender emotion. Logan slid the simple gold band onto Elena's finger, feeling the powerful weight of commitment in that quiet gesture. Elena gently returned the gesture, her eyes never leaving his. Finally, the officiant smiled warmly, his voice ringing clearly in the gentle silence. "You may now kiss the bride." Logan leaned in slowly, heart pounding fiercely, his lips gently meeting Elena's in a soft, powerful kiss, filled with quiet promise and profound love. Applause filled the garden, mingling with joyful laughter, but Logan barely heard it, so deeply lost in the woman he now called his wife. As they turned to face their guests, hand in hand, Logan felt a quiet strength and certainty fill him completely. They had faced judgment, fear, and doubt, yet standing here now, they had overcome every obstacle placed before them. Logan knew with absolute clarity that this day, this simple and heartfelt ceremony beneath open skies, was the truest reflection of who they were, two people from different worlds, forever united by the extraordinary power of love. Months turned gently into years, and Logan and Elena found quiet joy in the simple rhythm of their shared life. They built their world thoughtfully, each day an affirmation of the promises they'd made beneath the soft sunlight of their wedding day. Their home, modest yet filled with warmth, stood at the edge of Cedar Grove, welcoming to all who visited. Elena had seamlessly adapted to their simpler lifestyle, finding purpose and genuine happiness in community gatherings, local events, and quiet evenings spent beside Logan on their cozy porch. Logan continued running the garage, his reputation growing far beyond Cedar Grove's limits, customers drawn by his sincerity and skill. Together they demonstrated quietly and powerfully that love was not defined by wealth or privilege, but by mutual respect, patience, and unwavering devotion. Each evening, after the day's work was done, Logan and Elena would stroll quietly through their small garden, fingers gently intertwined, voices soft with shared stories of their day. The delicate flowers blooming along the path, flowers they'd planted together, symbolized the slow, steady growth of their bond. One summer evening, beneath the soft glow of stars, Logan turned to Elena, gently brushing her hair away from her face, his eyes filled with quiet gratitude. "Do you ever miss your old life?" he asked softly, voice laced with quiet vulnerability. Elena smiled softly, her gaze warm and tender as she shook her head gently. "Never. I used to believe happiness meant grandeur and status, but all those things felt hollow. Here, with you, everything feels real, meaningful. I have everything I've ever wanted, Logan." He drew her close, breathing in the comforting scent of her hair, heart full and steady. "I never imagined someone like you would choose this life. Choose me." Elena laughed gently, softly, kissing his cheek. "Choosing you was the easiest decision I ever made. You showed me what happiness truly is, Logan. It's simplicity, sincerity, love, everything you've given me." As the years passed, Elena's family gradually came to accept and even cherish the life she'd chosen. Visits became warm and frequent, the gentle laughter of grandchildren filling the house, creating memories that slowly healed past wounds. Logan's genuine kindness, his steady nature, had quietly won their hearts, proving their earlier doubts wrong. Together, Logan and Elena grew older, their bond deepening with each passing year. Their love remained quietly powerful, weathering every small hardship, celebrating each new joy. They had created a legacy defined not by wealth or status, but by the genuine, unwavering commitment they'd shown to each other and their community. On quiet nights, as they sat hand in hand beneath the stars, surrounded by family and friends, Logan and Elena felt the profound truth of their journey. Real happiness, real fulfillment, was never found in luxury or prestige, but in authenticity, resilience, and choosing each other every day. As the years gently softened their features and deepened the lines of quiet laughter around their eyes, Logan often looked back, reflecting quietly on the path they'd walked together. He saw clearly how their love had reshaped his life, had reshaped hers. And every night, holding Elena close beneath the vast, quiet sky, he whispered a silent prayer of gratitude, forever thankful for the woman who had bravely chosen love, for the life they'd built together, and for the beautiful truth that happily ever after was never about having it all, but about treasuring everything that truly mattered.